Good afternoon and good evening to those in Aotearoa. I am very proud to be hosting a very special episode of The Racket to boost visibility and focus on successful queer women in design and creative technologies. Welcome to this very special episode of The Racket. I'm hosting from Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Tēnā koutou katoa, welcome. Our guests are joining me from their homes in New South Wales, Australia, and I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, the waters, and the culture. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. On today's episode, we're going to discuss how our guests are navigating our industry and talk about what success means to our panel. Please feel free to add comments on the Facebook Live. And we would like to offer our credit to Helen Shrewsbury, who's a designer at Billy Blue College. Thanks, Helen, for pulling this together. So we have illustrator and Billy Blue College design alumni, Amy Blue, web sorceress and lead front-end developer, Tam Cruden, and social documentary photographer and queer artist, Seymour Hardy tonight. I'm Dr. Maria Walls, the program leader for Postgraduate Studies here at Media Design School in Auckland, and I'm extremely passionate about interdisciplinary design and creative technologies. And this episode is an important stepping stone to showcase some incredible queer women in my industry and create a space for visibility and representation, which is so important for everybody in the industry, particularly members of the LGBTQIA+ community who are just starting out. I have close to 20 years teaching and research experience in interdisciplinary creative technologies, fine art, design, broadcast media, and academia. I'm thrilled to share the stage with my guests today. First up, we have Amy Blue, illustrator and Billy Blue College of Design alumni. Amy Blue loves drawing, and her work has exploded into a pop culture frenzy using queer and wonderful illustrations, or in her own words, nonsense. Whether it's zines, stickers, lapel pins, art prints, or greeting cards, Amy's work is certain to make you smirk and ponder. She is an alumni of Billy Blue College of Design, graduating in 2017 with an advanced diploma of communication design and a Bachelor of Illustration. As her career in illustration took off, she's illustrated bespoke pieces for a variety of companies, including YWCA Australia, 2010, GLCS, Paramount House, Frankie Magazine, and Pitchfork. Let's have a quick look at Amy's work.
My favorite part about illustration is I'm not a very good speaker, so it's the way that the way I actually get my point across is through drawing. I think that's my favorite part because everyone has their story, and I can tell mine best through drawing. That's probably my favorite part.
Please welcome our first guest, Amy Blue, from her home in Sydney today.
Hi.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Hey, is being an illustrator what you expected it to be?
No, not at all. Basically, it took a lot longer than I expected to get to where I am today. I think I was a little bit naive and thought, success would just come quite instantly, but it's something that I have to do every single day, and it's something I have to keep reinventing and creating every single day, and it's just not what I expected at all. No.
In your intro, you actually mentioned that illustrations are a pop culture frenzy using queer and wonderful, illustrations. What is it that you love about drawing inspiration from the queer scene and the queer community?
I think I love speaking to the queer community through the universal language of pop culture. Pop culture is something that is sort of in everyone's lives. Lots of people can relate to certain references, and I like to use mainstream references but have secret hidden meanings within those references for the queer community to see. So it can be appreciated by all audiences, but I like the secret language that I can sort of create within that. Yeah.
Coded language.
Yeah, coded language, exactly. That's what we've been doing for centuries. With when you think about film, we've been coding our lives within secrets and subtext, and yeah. So I'm just sort of carrying that on, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So what else inspires you?
Well, definitely when it comes to my work, I think inspiration is a really hard concept sometimes, just because there's just so much, so many things. But when it comes to my work, definitely pop culture is one of the starting points of where I begin my journey with pieces of work. Yeah, and also small things like sitting in malls, in the food courts of supermarkets, or just watching people. I think everyone has that connection of just watching what people are doing, whether it's in real life or on film and TV. Yeah.
Wow, food courts. It's
Food courts. Yeah.
It's quite cool. And I mean, that actually kind of ties in with the next question. When do you feel most productive? Is it in food courts,
Well, not
for
really.
example?
Food courts are usually what I do when I'm sort of searching for something,
Mm.
and when I'm maybe having a little bit of hardship within productivity. But when I definitely feel the most productive is when I'm preparing for market stalls. So I like to do a lot of zine fairs. I find that my audience really attend zine fairs a lot. And so when I'm preparing for one of those, I get really excited because I know that I'm going to have my work in front of people in real life. They're going to get to see it. I'm going to get to hear what they think of it. And so I just create way too much stuff. I just go overboard, and it's crazy. My poor partner has to see because we live in quite a small space, so she has to just see everything. She's tripping over paper and everything. So yeah, that's when I'm most productive, and I sort of exit the building a little bit as well, because I'm just so into it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That kind of maximalism that's involved with making a zine and how it
Yeah.
needs to be sort of collage. Yeah, I absolutely understand.
Yeah.
But in a small space, that's really tough.
In a very small
Hey,
space.
in a very small space, Sydney's so expensive, isn't it?
Mm.
Hey, regarding the more solo nature of your work, how do you actually stay motivated in your individual pursuit?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who ask me this question a lot, because I do work from home in normal life, pre-COVID. So I've always been a solo kind of worker, and it probably stems from my childhood. I was an only child. I had to kind of learn to entertain myself. My mum hung out with me and stuff, but it was just she wanted me to be by myself and understand what it was like. So I think that really helped with my motivation when it comes to working by myself. It's kind of a comfortable area for me. Yeah.
Sure. That's interesting, pre-COVID, that you were also working from home. So,
Yeah. So I'm
yeah.
used to it, and giving people tips. I mean, they're not great tips, but yeah.
Yeah, being resilient in terms of
Yeah.
working from home throughout all this strangeness. Hey, do you feel a bit of a sense of community in your industry? And I think you touched on that earlier, talking about how zine fests are often full of, the target audience that you're trying to reach, for example.
Yeah, definitely. The audience side of my work is so rewarding. Getting to meet, people who admire my work is always I'm very British. I don't take a compliment very well, so I'm not great. But yeah, the audience is great. the community of like the illustration world, though, I don't really connect with that as much, I don't think. I think I'm more kind of connected to the queer kind of creative arts industry, in that it's there that I'm hearing stories that are similar to mine. It's there that I'm connecting to people who, you know, have from a very different backgrounds and all like just more diverse. And I think, I don't know, the illustration industry is a little bit, I don't know, shut off. Maybe.
Yeah, is it I mean, it's a really broad sort of spectrum illustration, and I guess what you're doing is quite niche, you know.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I think I've found my place more within that sort of queer art scene than an illustration scene, as an example.
For sure.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, and does that actually help, you know, or hinder your process, you know, that you are within that kind of very specific community? Like, I guess it's a bit of a mix of both helping because you know who you're talking to, but also hindering in terms of limitations. Maybe I'm answering your question probably here.
Yeah, that is it. That is exactly it. It's great because, you know, with projects I'm working on a new project at the moment, and I've got a message chain with some like close friends, asking them their experience of what it means, what like queer references within from their childhood. So we're all sort of in our 30s, and a lot of us grew up in Australia and had to really kind of like scour to find ourselves on TV, you know. So asking, like doing little things like this with friends, where it's just like asking what was your experience within that very niche topic. And I got some brilliant answers. So yeah, I'm very excited to start work on that.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
And bringing it right back, you're a Billy Blue Design College alumni, Billy Blue College of Design alumni. Such a mouthful. And of course, your surname is Blue, which
I know.
You'd completed studies previously. Why did you feel the need for further studies before launching your career as an illustrator?
I think I went to Billy Blue to refine my work, I think. So Billy Blue really offered me I think structure's the wrong word, but it offered me a chance to have the creative skill of drawing, but then sort of attach a message to it, you know, just like make it have a voice, give it something else other than just a pretty drawing. So it really helped in understanding audiences, like making sure the design is talking to the right people, and those kinds of little things were really valuable in my time there, definitely.
Yeah, finding a context for the work. I mean, you know, despite, you know, how technically accomplished any work might be, you know, actually understanding what the audience is seeing and perceiving and wanting and not wanting.
Yeah,
really
definitely.
Valuable.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, super cool. Do you have a favorite piece of work, like your all-time favorite? And if so, can you tell us why it's your favorite?
Yeah, so I took this question to mean my own. I don't think my work is the best at all. I just want to kind of preface that, but it wasn't all great, but it would have been amazing to have someone really prominent, you know, and really making it as an out queer person, you know, not having to hide or not having to. It would have it would have been amazing. But that is hopefully what today is for.
Yeah, I hope it's getting better for everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. That's amazing. What a
No
fantastic
worries.
interview.
Thank
Next
you.
up, you're welcome. Thank you. Next up, we have Tam. So Tam, and I'm about to murder your surname. I apologize. I'm going to ask you to clarify your surname when we speak to you. Is Tam Cruden is Swedish and relocated to Australia in 2018 to be with her girlfriend. According to one client, Tam is without doubt the fastest and most knowledgeable front-end developer they've worked with. She's currently the lead front-end developer at Squiz in Sydney. What is that exactly? I can't wait to find out. She's taken on many roles in front-end engineering throughout her career, spanning 2 decades, building great products and working environments. She loves working around the globe, and in recent years, she's advanced towards leadership roles. Her work has been included building secret experimental apps for Volvo, I wonder what they are, enabling wait staff to be on top of things in the Lego restaurant in Denmark, and building a few more WordPress websites than she can care to recount, all focusing on great user experience in today's digital age. When she can, she engages with the LGBTQIA plus community, most recently with Dykes on Bikes, which is the reason that she rides a motorbike these days. I need to know more. Please welcome Tam Cruden. And let's have a look at Tam in action and some of the impressive work she's produced over her career.
The automaker has demonstrated with a trial group of customers a new service that would let consumers have their online orders delivered right to their car, no matter where they are.
A combination of storytelling, brick recognition tech, and high-end content invites guests to a story centered around their own builds. Food boxes leave the kitchen perfectly timed between screen, conveyor, and robots.
Hi, Tam. How are you?
Hi, Maria. I'm great.
Can you please tell me how to pronounce your surname?
Absolutely. So the way that you'd pronounce my whole name in Swedish is Tam Sjödin.
Thank
and
you
it's
so much.
completely impossible for a Kiwi to get right.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and this evening.
Absolutely.
Tam, you used to say that what you do is the internet equivalent of putting up wallpaper. Someone needs to build the walls, the client picks the wallpaper, it's designed by an artist, and you make the room come together. Then the internet evolved, and what you do now also involves building the kitchen. Please explain. What is it that you do? And also let me know what it is that you love most about your role.
So the reason why I equate my work to sort of putting up wallpaper is because the amalgamation of technology is a team effort. It's not like I can do my job in isolation, and I have colleagues who help me build things like a backend, people who set up servers, and designers who make beautiful artwork, and then the front-end developer kind of sits in the middle in between these things and makes the pretty stuff actually work with the technology and also make the technology look a little bit prettier. And while there's a lot more work involved in that than those sentences seem to imply, it does feel a little bit like putting up wallpaper, because you can be a great painter and paint beautiful walls, but you can actually still not be great at putting up wallpaper, which is, it's a challenge in its own. I think it's just sort of a quick way to sum up for someone who's not technically inclined. And there's a lot of technical detail that tends to just immediately make people feel like, oh, I don't know this tech stuff, which is why I describe it that way. And then as my career has progressed, I tend to see these changes throughout the industry where, while a front-end developer has this clear focus of bringing things together, we've kind of ended up branching out with the newer frameworks that are so commonly named as Angular, React, and Vue these days. These things are building a little bit more. And while it's not necessarily the business logic that tends to live on a server somewhere, it's enough extra that it's a little bit like taking those wallpaper things, and then you need to maybe start tiling the kitchen, and then you need to maybe start putting the kitchen sink in, and you need to sort of understand a little bit more about the entire process in order to get the whole thing to come together, because otherwise it doesn't end up finished.
For sure. You know, and that team collaboration and interdisciplinarity and having to
Absolutely.
understand a bit of everything, but also be specialist in your area. Super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what I really love about doing this is that it immediately impacts everyone who uses the product. And it just means that I get to make everything feel good. And if I do a really good job, when you click a button, you get a nice feeling.
And there's such a big difference, isn't there, from the user end, between a nice product that is seamless and intuitive versus one that's clunky and doesn't
Yeah,
do what the button seems to indicate it
exactly.
should. Yeah.
And if I do an excellent job, you will feel good even if the button starts a spinner and you have to wait for it to load.
Very reassuring and very important, especially in today's digital world. Did you always know that you wanted to be a front-end developer?
Not at all, which is strange because I tend to say that my career started when I was 5 years old. And what that means to me is that our family computer got struck by lightning, and my father told me, "Oh, we need to fix this, so let's go to the shop." So we went to the local computer shop. We picked up a spare part to replace the one that had broken, the power supply, as it's called. Brought that home, and my dad was in a wheelchair and didn't have a lot of upper body strength. So 5 years old, I was the most suited to replace this broken part. So under my dad's very intense supervision, I screwed everything apart, put the new thing in, put everything back together, and voila, we have a working computer.
Wow.
And since then, I've kind of been working in tech. I started doing programming when I was a teenager, but I didn't really think that I was going to make that a career. That was something that I was doing on my free time. And that's a fun thing that I thought was, at that time, it was play. And for the longest time, I thought I would go to university and do something spectacularly complicated, like become an engineer and build bridges, or maybe I'll be a doctor or something like that. That was sort of on my charts. And then I kind of just ended up where I am.
Wow. What a baptism by fire. Starting off with the lightning strike. It's an
Oh, yeah.
extraordinary, it's an extraordinary, origin story. Very extraordinary. I like when you
At
start
least I
talking
didn't
about
get struck by
play.
lightning.
Yeah. Yes, we're lucky to have you in the world. Tech is often thought of as a male-dominated industry. Have you seen that shift throughout your career?
Absolutely. So early on in my career, I would, as a default, I would end up being the one woman on a 10 people show. And as the years have passed, more and more often you see at least someone else. And while I wouldn't say it's a female dominated field in any way, being like the way that it is, it has progressed like as faster than a lot of other things that I can see outside of the front end sphere. Because front end is a little bit more centric towards the visual impact that technology can have. And if you look at people who do database work, it's a little bit less intuitive to see what's happening. So it's more on a theoretical level, which has attracted more women to at least give it a shot. And once you give it a shot, you might find that you really like working with it. So I see these days a lot of female colleagues, at least in the front end field. And it's progressed from maybe 1 in 20 to 1 in 10 from my perspective. And in Sweden, it might be even more than that, because my experience there was maybe like even 1 in 5.
Wow. So from
that could
5,
be company
10
specific. So
sure. So those percentages are quite, increasing from your
absolutely.
perspective.
And every time I end up with a new employer, I discover that they are fighting to find the female talent as well. It's always on people's mind when they're hiring to try to find enough female candidates that there's a chance that at least one of them will be the best candidate. And that tends to be the industry's issue, because it doesn't matter if you have one female candidate out of 10, because the chances of each single candidate being the best candidate is still going to be the 1 out of 10. So if you're going to end up hiring female candidates, you're going to have at least a bit of a chance to pick the girl. And if there's no one in that pool, of course you're going to hire a guy, because that's who's available. And I have actually had the weird fortune of ending up on an all-girl team.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So while the industry is definitely still fighting to find the women, it does occur today, or this was even like 5 years ago, that you can find a team of 4 women working with technology. And it went so far as that like we needed to hire someone. And of course we weren't literally looking for a woman, so we hired a guy onto that team, and he got to feel exactly the way that I've always felt joining a team of all men, just a little bit like the odd one out. I'd like to think that we very quickly welcomed him, and then he felt like everything was great. But it definitely started off with that slightly awkward situation where it was a very homogenous group, and it doesn't matter what type of diversity that a work group lacks. Until you find a little bit of diversity in a group, the fact that you are a little bit too much the same tends to create issues.
Yeah, diversity is certainly helpful.
Oh yeah.
And it is hard to recognize homogeneity until it sort of becomes plain through an addition of somebody diverse. Yeah. So how important is it for you to celebrate the work of queer women in your industry and build on from that in your experience?
It's super important, because if we can't celebrate the wins, then we're gonna start like focusing too much on the less good stuff, and we're gonna start feeling things like imposter syndrome, like, oh no, I'm not worthy of being here, and maybe now I'm not good enough, or we're just gonna get a little bit too bogged down with the stuff that isn't amazing. And I think if we celebrated queer women specifically better within the industry, then young people starting out their careers would feel more comfortable being out. Because I believe that a lot of my colleagues, they don't know how I am queer. They don't have an awareness of who I am, because it's just not something that I shout from the rooftops. Which means that if someone looks at me, they might not think that I am sort of trailblazing for them, or are leading the way, or being the role model that they wish they had, because they might just not realize that I am there. So
Absolutely.
That's why celebration is so important.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And also, like it enables us to be completely different from each other as well, within our community. Your career has progressed and you've moved into leadership roles. You're coaching and mentoring others. What's your message as a mentor to your team members?
I think the most important thing that anyone should hear is, don't be afraid to be wrong. Because it's just such a sort of basic thing. We try not to make mistakes, but if you don't make mistakes, you can't learn from the mistakes and you can't progress. It doesn't really matter if it's about saying the wrong thing. Sometimes we will say the wrong thing. We will say something that's maybe we heard something, we repeat it, it's not quite right for whatever reason. And unless someone tells us like, hey, I need to nudge you a little bit here, that wasn't quite right, we won't learn. We won't know that what the thing that we thought was correct was actually not correct. And if we don't try something, like with my own work as an example, if I don't try writing code in a certain way and then trying to run that code and it doesn't work, then I won't know that it won't work. Maybe I could actually make it like slightly different, and suddenly everything works exactly as I was hoping for. And the only way to get there, to that deeper understanding is to make the mistakes, to be wrong, and yeah, try to dare to be wrong, and then
Oh,
keep
I
moving
love
forward.
that. I'm such a big fan of, embracing failure and actually using it to actually progress and really holding it as a wonderful way of learning and
Absolutely. And
unpacking
like
things.
a great example is if you do have a mentor or coach or any colleague of any kind, a great way to get better at things is to say things to your colleague and dare to share things with someone who might hierarchically be higher up than you, and maybe they'll actually share some wisdom with you, or maybe they learned something from it.
For sure. So wonderful just to be open to that. So I think actually speaking on this panel might already indicate this, but are you out at work? We've kind of talked around this.
Yeah, and that's a really complicated question to
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
because, as I said, I don't really say, hey, yeah, I'm here, I'm queer, look at me, because I never really felt like that's something that makes sense to me, especially not in a work context, because I'm there to perform my function as a team member.
Yeah, yeah.
Most people will probably have heard me talk about dykes on bikes at work or something like that. I've very openly mentioned my partner, Nikki, but I never tell people, hey, I am a transgender woman in technology. And because I don't mention it, no one really asks. And because no one asks, I wouldn't say that people know. And it's great. I'm really happy to say that no one asks. And it would be really rude for people to ask.
I know. It's so
unless
funny,
there's a
isn't it?
contextual reason for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it tends to just end up being that I'm not out because it would require effort to be out. And whether or not I am, I've never experienced that someone actually makes a thing out of it. So it doesn't tend to affect work life.
So you've worked, a lot of legwork has been done to get the acceptance of queer. I'm absolutely bungling this question, excuse me. A lot of legwork has been done to get the acceptance of us as queer women and the experiences. I'm sorry, I'm going to skip that question, doesn't make sense. At what point in your career have you felt the most successful?
I think it was probably the moment I realized I'd been working for 10 years doing what I do. It was a strange realization. And I was like, wow, this has actually been happening for a whole decade. And it sort of happened around the same time that I realized that not only can I do what I do successfully in Sweden at the time, but I could also go anywhere internationally and do the exact same thing. And it just enables such an extremely free opportunity for me to just be who I am, wherever I am, and just always be successful.
That's so exciting and wonderful. Tam, thank you so much. What a candid and inspiring chat you've had with us. Our next guest is Seymour Hardy, and we'd like to welcome Seymour next. Thanks, Tam. Welcome, Seymour. Seymour studied at the three main art schools in Sydney before she was a freelance photographer working for the community newspaper, the Sydney Star Observer. She has documented some of the most iconic moments of Sydney's queer scene for over 35 years, that's since the early 1980s. Her photographs featured social documentary portraiture of many community events, including, most notably, 30 plus years of documenting the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, Fair Day and Festival. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Seymour Hardy. Let's have a quick look at some of her work.
They just did.
Thank you. Seymour, welcome. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Great. Hey, what inspired you to initially what inspired you initially, and what continues to inspire you now with photography?
Diane Arbus would be one, Olive Cotton, Tracy Moffat, Annie Leibovitz, life and politics.
Wow.
And obviously climate change these days.
Sure. It's an amazing spread of people to be inspired by. You're a very visible leader yourself, but was there a queer woman that you felt was blazing the trail ahead of you in photography?
No.
It's obvious that you care deeply about the community just by nature of the photography that you've done, and that your work focuses on creating more visibility for queer women, which is essential and important work. There are a few other photographers documenting the Sydney GLBTQIQ scene. This is a different acronym. What made you decide to concentrate on the lesbian, Indigenous, and subcultures within the queer communities, the queer subculture right at the very beginning?
Perhaps because I was a lesbian and there were no visible images of lesbians, around. Living in a void is not the way to go.
Seems like a very reasonable answer. No actual images. It's kind of like a missing piece, isn't it?
You could have your Superwoman comic strip hero, but she wasn't supposedly a lesbian. And, this is the whole problem with lesbian or female identity. And as a feminist, this is what happens. We were written out of history for a very long time. So once you learn about the kind of what has happened to female artists, writers, everything, publishers used to just pulp women's work. It's really significant that we needed, as far as I was concerned, more images to represent the kind of lifestyle and existence that we have.
Absolutely. And I guess, does that extend to people who identify as women as well? Or as female at some point in their lives?
I've managed to document the full spectrum. I've done Indigenous, I've done disabled, I've done intersex, I've done transgender people. I mean, the thing is, we are a subculture within the mainstream subculture of gay and lesbian. And in those early days, it was, to me, significantly important to ensure that all the different subsections of our culture were included. And, this is the thing, lesbians still are kind of below the socioeconomic level of white male, white gay male, heterosexual women, etc., in that economic run of the ladder. So, it will take another X number of years before we are even equal to a white female. But, we're not the only ones in that struggle. Indigenous women are probably far less representative. Don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, well, within
the culture.
Yeah, this kind of strange pecking order or hierarchy. It's a very interesting discussion. How much do your own personal politics play a role in your work? It seems pretty obvious that politics is a bit of a driving force.
It's a bit obvious, yes. I consider myself a bad lesbian, thanks to Roxanne Gay. She's really given me a good label because I'm not a perfect anything. I was heterosexual. I turned. I've been in a relationship for 30-odd years, almost 30 years with my partner from Belgium. And, I am not like everybody else. I'm different. So, I have a born-again Christian brother who hates me, has never acknowledged my partner.
Wow.
I've suffered that kind of abuse for a long time. But, I do what I do. I think it's really important to do your own thing.
Yeah, and clearly you're a good role model in that regard. Hey, so the F word, feminism, how much of a role does it play in your work currently?
It's
Because,
an underlying factor. I think
yeah.
because I'm a political animal with a variety of interests in, the ecological stand, Indigenous stand, immigration, refugees, things like this. If you're going to be somebody who contributes to society, then you have to stay aware of things. I'm not visible in the community as much as I used to be. I was on a couple of boards and things like that, but it's still it's still a life ongoing.
This isn't scripted, but have you seen feminism change and transform from the time when you started out right through to the moment?
Yes, there's at least acknowledgement of the Black woman's experience now. There was definitely, and they didn't in early days also acknowledge mothers as being feminists. Women who had children were kind of ostracised as, oh no, you've gone the wrong route there. But it's,
wow, yeah. The whole sort of separatist stuff from the 70s. Yeah, and like the embracing of gender, more now, and perhaps just that wider spectrum that you've
even 20 years ago when the women's space started or attempted to get off the ground, they did not want to have transgender women involved.
Yeah, and the turf sort of attitudes that
they eventually went under.
Yeah, went under, down under, and beyond, I hope. So you're so connected to community organisation.
You're blurting, sounding really weird now.
Oh gosh,
I can hear that one.
That will be my very expensive headset. One moment. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you. You're so connected to the community through voluntary positions in a number of community organisations. Pride Lesbian and Gay Community as a director for 4 years, a member of the New South Wales Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby, a supporter of the AIDS Council of New South Wales, and you're on the official Gay Games bid team.
I was. Past tense.
You were? Okay, sure. I'm not a sport person.
That was 2002.
Was it really? That's quite some time back now. Thank you. How important has this immersion in the community been for your work?
Well, they're my family. That's all I need to say.
Nice. Good answer. So over the years, what's been the biggest change? And you've already touched on quite a bit of that within the community.
Oh, lots of change.
Is there
We're allowed to have sex now. We're allowed to be sexual. Sex is not a dirty word anymore.
Wow, that's a really interesting thing to highlight as the main change.
Well, in the day, what's it called? Penetration was an issue for some vanilla lesbians.
Yeah,
there you go. Look that up.
The control of other people's bodies is weird, isn't it? I hope that's changed a lot for
women police women. Damned Whores and God's Police. If you've read her book.
Great reference. Hey, let's have a look at one of your photographs, Seymour. It's from the On-Air Cafe Cure in Clar Valley. Why is this one of your favourites?
Originally, it was a setup for a Mardi Gras poster. They were going to have a billboard, and they said, "Oh, we want this, blah blah blah." And this is actually a little bit of a take on a French magazine with models and all that sort of thing. And it was just about we are everywhere. I wanted it to look as if, and it's still relevant today, a couple of leather dykes, not a trans, but that Sexy Alexi, she's a performance artist, and she does drag king stuff. So, they're talking to the leather girls. My partner's there with the dog beside her, and sitting opposite her is another friend of mine, Philippa, who has children now. And then the woman who's the cafe owner. I mean, everybody in that picture is a lesbian, basically. But also on the window is a little sign saying "Refugees welcome here," because that was a period of time when Australia was, throwing the boats out of, the country, etc. And realistically, it's a commentary on the time, but it's also a projection of our futures, our hopes, girls getting
Wow,
together.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, like a gathering, a very potent kind of gathering. So your 2016 exhibition, Sydney, Sex and Subculture, historical, hysterical and happy recollections of the queer community, must have really felt quite rewarding because you were celebrating 4 decades. That's 40 years of documenting the local culture. I'm really curious to know about how you chose from your thousands of images, which ones you wanted to include in that
Well, firstly,
exhibition.
let's say the
Hard to
numbers are a little incorrect in that, but I don't look 600, do I? It's really difficult to go through all those pictures. It was torture. It took me 2 years, basically. And also, they weren't the only ones on the wall. And you can go to MySpace Gallery and look them up if you want to. The gallery still shows them. But I also had a 300 to 400 slide projection thing happening in a photo booth where it was like a peep show and people could sort of look into those. So, there's just too many images, really.
Yeah, it's always a hard thing, like actually, picking out of such a large archive too. Yeah, exciting though, very exciting. And what you choose to actually like curate and focus upon is really key because it changes the messages, I assume. How did this exhibition, how did exhibiting this retrospective feel for you? And did this feel like the perfect time in your career to, exhibit this kind of collection? Didn't feel like the perfect time, no?
No, it wasn't that so much. It's just that I've been exhibiting for a long time. And, exhibiting means you get a bunch of friends together and you have a bit of a party and people see your work. And then, if you're lucky, more people go and see your work and stuff. But it's just a kind of a celebration in the middle of your life at that time. And if you're lucky, you sell a few pieces, which is generally what I have done. But it's just another little milestone in the success story as far as, that life as an artist is.
Sure. So not an apex, more of just another peak
thing
along the process. Yeah.
And that was something that I think Amy was talking about, and in some ways Tam as well. There's in the journey that we are on, there's kind of little moments where you have to celebrate what has happened then. You've worked towards one particular big thing. It's really important to celebrate that time and be with your friends.
Yeah, that measure of success again.
Yeah.
And absolutely coming together, as you point out, with with friends and other members of the community too. So in the late 70s, your work featured on the cover of the first edition of the gay and lesbian community newspaper, the Star Observer, and this positioned you within the gay and lesbian community. I assume other types of communities within the spectrum too, especially you photographing the iconic Sydney gay and lesbian Mardi Gras over the years. Your work has been exhibited in libraries, galleries, and museums across Australia. You were interviewed by ABC TV for the 40th anniversary of the Mardi Gras last year. You've been published in several publications throughout your career. So looking back over your career, do you feel successful? And when did you first feel successful?
And it's elusive. It's very elusive. I must be successful. Must be successful. You guys got me to talk about it, but it's I don't feel successful per se. I think it's an ongoing process. If I'm having a good day and my mental health is good and I feel creative and everything is just, I get to have a walk on the beach or whatever I'm doing, and I'm with friends or, we've got a dinner party to organise or something, there's something to be really grateful and happy about. But it's the little things, I think. Success is about being able to do and be with the people you want to be and do things with, working collaboratively or, whatever. I'm quite privileged as a white person, and I acknowledge that we, need to do a lot more for the Indigenous community here. And I also feel after I photographed the Yes Rally in Sydney, the final sort of announcement, because we had a vote here 2 years ago and we got to have equality and marriage and all that racket. I felt that was kind of a combination of everything that I had sort of worked towards, for that period of time. And that meant that I could then go to other areas and focus on those. So I'm actually kind of doing more, documentation on other things rather than just the gay and lesbian community.
So in some ways, would it be fair to say that your measure of success is actually contributing energy to the wider community to ensure that, that we get, positive change coming through more and more?
I'm an altruistic character. I've kind of...
Sure.
Yeah, and the reason I did what I did when I did it, early days, 30 years ago, was to make sure that our history is available for people to study, to make sure that we are included. And that, to me, is success because it's available now. City of Sydney have got it online for people and researchers. If corporates want to use them, they have to pay.
Sure.
Which is great because that way, the City of Sydney gets some of the money back. But it's about, an ongoing process for me. And yes, I do try and support other artists and encourage them.
Wonderful. So wonderful. Oh, Seymour, that's just it's a really tremendous advocacy that you do for all of us. I understand that you're concentrating on your Instagram account, which is C.Moore Sydney, and that's C.Moore Sydney, one word. Yeah, thank you. At the moment, and it's politics around that too, obviously. What does the next phase of your career look like to you?
The Instagram account, because I'd like to sort of try and sell some photos through there. I just had somebody buy something from some old posters that I had in America, PayPal, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. There's a few irons in the fire. We're desperate to try and see my partner's family in Belgium, but, because of that scenario, my mother actually died 3 weeks ago in the middle of COVID, so I've gone through that process.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, she was 97. She had a fabulous life, and I looked after her. But, there are people who missed out on the funeral, so there's that scenario. But it's one of those things, I think. We all do what we possibly can do and make our family and lesbian queer community included in the ongoing process.
Yeah, really important. Thank you, Seymour. I'd like to welcome all of our guests back into the discussion now and bounce around a few final ideas. Thanks for a great discussion.
Pleasure.
So hopefully all of the panel are now rejoining us. And one of the first questions that I would like to direct to everybody, or actually perhaps just to Amy or Tam, is during your careers, have you had to pull off side gigs to keep the money coming in as you were starting out? I think we've all done, I've done lots of hospo.
I'm actually doing one now. Unfortunately, I have work tomorrow. So I just work in a little art shop in Newtown, which, retail sucks, but it's very good just to have that, thing to fall back on because the workflow isn't always constant. So, yeah, that's my side gig.
It's really great. It's sort of, it's important to be able to eat and pay the rent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Seymour, you worked as a registered nurse and a clinical coordinator. You've also worked as a secretary, amongst other roles, while you've been working as a photographer. What's your advice to photographers, entering the industry and balancing side gigs?
Get out of it.
Get out of it. Leave now.
Multitask.
Just come to IT instead.
Yeah, okay.
I do photography on my free time. It's way better.
Look, as a creative, I came out of 3 art schools after I'd already done nursing and so forth. So the nursing on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, paid for my 5 days a week at art school. And I did that for, 3 to 5 years, going to the next art school. If you have a passion, you won't stop, but don't burn out.
Yeah, balancing act.
And as a registered nurse, I was able to do part-time work and, still work with people.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Western culture often rates our success by the money, and we've all talked about success in this conversation, rates our success by the money that we earn or our productivity. Can you think of a better measure for success? Anybody in this panel?
Happiness.
Absolutely.
Great.
Happiness all the way.
Happy and gay?
Happy and gay.
Happy and queer.
The happier and the gayer I feel, the more
Gay and
successful.
happy.
Yeah, happiness. Wow, that's an interesting measure that everybody seems to be unanimous on.
Well, you can share the wealth with your friends, but you can't take it with you, you know?
No.
And that's kind of a bit fatalistic, I'm sorry. But the reality is we're living now. We don't have a second life unless, you're into that computer system. But it's really important to live now. Every day is important.
Is there some defiance in us choosing to be happy as a marker of success, despite everything?
Come on, Tam.
Is it actually, is it kind of like...
absolutely. We kind of get told, like, struggle more, work harder, be better. But if we instead look inwards and just sort of believe in ourselves, when we feel that imposter syndrome come up behind us and start making us feel like maybe we aren't successful, maybe we aren't that great, if we can just look at ourselves and feel like, actually, you know what, I'm happy. And that's way more important than if I met my quota or not, because those are just numbers. That's just money. That's
amazing.
That's really what's important.
Quite an interesting measure of activism, a quiet kind of activism. Nice. Do any of you have a dream project that you're longing to work on? Any dreams in the room?
Yeah, more visibility for lesbians. I'd love to do a book of or whatever of comedians, lesbian comedians. Although Hannah Gadsby seems to have taken the whole market off the planet. But recognising women in the workforce and kind of highlighting them is what I portraiture like to do.
Yeah.
I think that my dream project to work on is one where everyone who works on it is actually really happy with it. And the end result is somehow like making other people's lives better at the same time. Because while I've worked on things where people have been pretty happy on working with it, probably because they got paid very handsomely, those projects don't tend to have a positive impact on people's lives. But if you could have a positive impact on people's lives and still have people be happy instead of feeling like they're just stretching themselves too thin in order to make other people's lives better, if we could have all of that at the same time, that would be my dream project.
That's really inspiring. Thanks, Tam. Amy and Seymour, as creative people, social media can create additional levels of stress, as I'm sure you're aware. And needing to let people see our creativity. How do you manage your social media use?
I'm just really bad at it. Like, I don't do what I'm supposed to do. Like, I have friends who are like so on top of that stuff, and I'm not the right person to ask. I do have all of the things, I just don't feed them very much, like I don't look after my plants well. Like, my girlfriend does that for me, so maybe I should get her to do my social media stuff. Yeah.
Social media manager.
Yeah. She needs
kind of a whole
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a cop out.
I know. I'm totally, I agree.
That's a good
I'm
idea.
Not working full time, so I have the luxury of time, which is what it takes.
Yeah.
And so I keep an eye on my Instagram account and my Facebook accounts. I have 3. And so, I'm a multiple personality. But it's that thing of, it's what you put into it and what you want to get out of it ultimately that will drive you to do certain things.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Okay, and the final question to wrap. There are networks such as Pride and Diversity's Sapphire group, who are available to chat to queer women of all professions. But do you think that you would benefit from a network specifically for creative or technological queer women? And if so, what sort of support could a network like this offer you? Or do you know of any that already exist?
There are networks like that. I had a really fun time with a network in Berlin called Unicorns in Tech. It's for all queer people, but
Yeah.
networks like that exist all around the globe, and it's just a lot of fun being part of them, because you just get that thing that was talked about before, like it feels like you're part of the family, and you just get that warmth being part of those groups.
Yeah, super good.
I'd like there to be a network. There wasn't one when I was doing stuff.
No, it's pretty new.
You'll have to tell me where it is. I'll find it.
There are certainly lots of places. Yeah, it is. It's really important for people to be able to reach each other. And the internet does provide that potential.
Very much so.
For everybody. Okay, I'd like to thank my guests today, Amy, Tam, and Seymour. It's been an absolute pleasure having this discussion with you on the Racket, and happy Pride Month to you.
Yeah,
thanks very much for joining.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
So again, for anybody watching who would like to add any questions into the Facebook Live, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, it's good night from us at the Racket.